my wedding!
I still don't know how I explain this to anyone. I never planned on kissing the most feared man in Seoul, especially not in front of the woman who was set to marry him before midnight. But when I caught the glint of metal hidden in his glass, I had 3 seconds to choose: let him die or burn my cover to the ground. I chose him. I just didn't realize that saving his life would make me the next name on somebody's list. This story is going to shock you, so listen close, because you're going to need to keep up. I had been playing dumb for 3 weeks, and that night in Seoul was supposed to be my last performance. The Kangdamli's private hall was dressed in white orchids, gold trim, and men in tailored suits who were carrying a lot more than dinner mints. Nobody in that room was who they said they were, and that included me, blending in perfectly with the danger disguised as elegance. I pressed my clipboard to my chest and gave the head of security the same harmless smile I'd been giving him for 3 weeks straight. He didn't buy it, and honestly, he shouldn't have. But a wide, apologetic smile from a clumsy event coordinator works better than any fake badge ever could. My heels were gorgeous and completely useless for actual movement, exactly the kind of impractical choice a nervous planner would make on the biggest night of her career. I stumbled into a waiter, apologized too many times in a voice too soft to be threatening, and kept moving. Nobody suspects the woman who won't stop saying sorry. Soo-yoon Bae stood in the center of the hall, poised like she'd been carved out of porcelain, in a gown that caught the light every time she turned. She smiled at every guest, accepted every compliment with practiced grace, but her eyes weren't smiling. I was supposed to be checking floral arrangements, glassware, the timing of the toast. That was my cover. What I was actually doing was watching her. Every gesture, every glance she cut toward the man she was hours away from marrying. Kang Joon was impossible to ignore even standing perfectly still. His suit looked like it had been built around him, dark and severe, his black hair combed back from a face too sharp and too controlled to be called merely handsome. He didn't smile. He watched the room like a man counting down the minutes until he could leave and go handle something that actually mattered to him. When guests approached to offer congratulations, he gave them the bare minimum: a nod, a short word, nothing more. I should have been terrified of him. Anyone with sense would have been, but fear had never once stopped me from finishing a job, and that night I had a job only I knew about. Soo-yoon Bae drifted toward the table where the toasting glasses sat in neat rows, waiting for the ceremony. She lifted one glass as if admiring the champagne, then smoothly swapped it with the one beside it. Nobody caught it. The guards were watching the doors. The guests were too busy networking through their small talk. June was too busy looking untouchable to notice the small, deadly detail happening 3 feet from him. But I caught it, because catching things nobody else notices was the entire reason I was in that room. My pulse spiked, not from fear, but from the specific kind of adrenaline that shows up right before you do something reckless and necessary at the same time. I knew exactly what she'd done, and exactly what would happen if I let it play out. Kang Joon would die at his own engagement dinner, poisoned by his own bride, and the retaliation that followed would tear the city apart, even by the standards of the world he ran. I tucked my clipboard under my arm and cut across the hall with the same soft, apologetic energy I'd worn all night, weaving through guests, murmuring excuse me's, looking exactly like a woman doing her job, and not a woman about to blow up her entire assignment in the next 30 seconds. June reached the table and picked up precisely the glass Soo-yoon had marked, the one she'd placed exactly where his hand always landed. He lifted it, glancing over the gathering crowd as they assembled for the toast. I had 3 seconds, maybe 4 if I moved fast. 3 seconds to decide whether to save a stranger's life or torch my entire assignment in the next 30 seconds. I crossed that hall. I didn't run because running draws eyes, but I moved fast enough that heads started turning, heels clicking sharp against the marble, the sound cutting through the hush that had settled before the toast. He saw me coming and frowned, clearly trying to work out why his event coordinator was crashing toward him at the most important moment of his night. I watched the glass tilt toward his mouth in slow motion. So I did the only thing left to do. I grabbed his face with both hands, pulled him down, and kissed him, right there in front of 200 people, in front of his bride, in front of every guard in the room. The silence afterwards was suffocating. I felt Soo-yoon's stare tutting into the side of my face like a blade, felt June's breath stop completely against my mouth, felt the whole room freeze like a held breath. The glass slipped from his hand and shattered against the floor, champagne spreading across the marble like proof of my own insanity. When I pulled back, June was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. Anger, confusion, something dangerously close to interest, all tangled together. He didn't speak for a long moment, just studied me like he hadn't decided yet whether to have me removed from the building or figure out what the hell had just happened. Soo-yoon stepped toward me, shaking with fury she wasn't bothering to hide. "Who do you think you are?" Her voice cracked like glass, loaded with public humiliation. Before I could answer, before I could invent something that made any sense at all, June's hand closed around my wrist. His grip was warm, firm, entirely too possessive for a man who'd just been almost poisoned. "Stay away from her," he said to Soo-yoon, though his eyes never left mine. His voice was low, level, and absolutely lethal. Soo-yeon looked like she might combust. "She kissed you in front of everyone at our engagement dinner and you're going to protect her?" He turned to his bride, and whatever expression crossed his face made her take an involuntary step back. "I'm going to find out exactly why she did that. You're going to wait." He pulled me through the hall, and I didn't fight it because fighting would have been useless right then. Guests parted like we were contagious, whispers starting before we'd even cleared the room. In a side corridor, out of sight, he pressed me against the wall, not hard enough to hurt, just hard enough to make it very clear I wasn't the one in control. "Either you're suicidal," he said, voice low, "or you just saved my life." I breathed in cologne and danger in equal measure and made myself speak steady. "Don't drink from it." He frowned. "What?" "That glass. Don't ever drink from it." The confusion on his face lasted exactly 3 seconds before it hardened into something colder, sharper. He let me go and walked straight back into the hall, and I followed because I'd already thrown myself into the chaos and needed to see how far it went. He picked the broken glass up off the floor himself and handed the shards to a guard with a single word: "Test it." Soo-yeon stood pale but composed, playing innocent so well I almost believed her myself. She was good, maybe better than me. The minutes that followed were unbearable. Nobody spoke. When the guard came back and murmured something into June's ear, his face went hard in a way that would have scared the bravest men in that room. "Poison." He said the word out loud, let it hang there in the silence. He looked at Soo-yeon with an expression that gave away nothing, then looked at me with something that looked almost like respect. Someone tried to kill me at my own engagement dinner. Soo-yeon gasped, hand fluttering to her chest, eyes wide with performance-grade shock. "That's insane. Who would do that?" June didn't answer her. He turned to the room instead. "The party's over. Everyone leave." Nobody argued. The hall cleared fast, guests eager to be anywhere else. When it was just me, June, Soo-yeon, and a handful of guards left, he finally spoke to me again. "You," he pointed at me, "stay under my protection until I understand exactly what happened tonight." "Protection," I repeated, like I didn't already know what that word meant in his world. "That's right. You don't leave my sight until this is resolved." Soo-yeon laughed bitterly. "You're going to lock up the woman who kissed you in front of everyone? How romantic." He didn't even glance at her. "You're not going anywhere either, until this is sorted out. You both stay." I should have been panicking, should have been calculating an exit. Instead, looking at the intensity in June's eyes, all I felt was the absolute certainty that I'd walked into something far more dangerous than any assignment I'd ever taken. "What's your name?" he asked, voice low, too intimate for the situation. "Zora. Zora Bankole." "Zora." He said it slowly, like he was testing the weight of it. "You just became the most interesting person in Seoul. I hope you're ready for what comes next." I wasn't. I especially wasn't ready for the way my heartbeat picked up every single time he got too close. Kang Jun's penthouse sat above the compound with a view of Seoul that would have been beautiful if I weren't being marched there like a well-dressed prisoner. 2 guards trailed behind me, silent as shadows, while Jun walked ahead without checking if I was following because he already knew I would. He was right. Resisting would have been pointless, and part of me was genuinely curious to see what happened now that my cover as a harmless planner was ash on the floor. The penthouse was quiet in that deliberate, expensive way. Minimalist, controlled, every surface screaming money and restraint. Snow drifted past floor-to-ceiling windows. June dismissed the guards with a single look and closed the door with a click that felt far too final. "Sit," he said, nodding toward a leather couch near the fireplace. I didn't. Sitting felt like conceding, and even though he technically controlled every square inch of that room, I still had enough pride left to pretend otherwise. "I'd rather stand." He raised an eyebrow, and for the first time since we'd met, something like amusement flickered across his face. "You kissed the head of the most powerful syndicate in Seoul in front of 200 people, saved my life, and now you're worried about my couch?" When he said it like that, it did sound ridiculous. I kept my arms crossed anyway. I was doing my job. Do event coordinators usually kiss the host as part of the service? Only when the host is about to be poisoned by his own fiancé. The amusement vanished. He stepped closer, close enough that I had to tip my chin to hold his gaze. "How did you know?" I saw her switch the glasses. "And why did you care?" That was the real question. My assignment had never included saving his life. It involved watching him, documenting him, feeding information back to people who paid well for it. Letting him drink that poison would have been convenient and safe, but watching that glass rise toward his mouth, all I could think was that I couldn't let it happen. "Killing a man at his own engagement dinner is terrible for the optics," I said instead, keeping my voice light. "Bad for my reviews." He didn't smile. "You're lying." "Everyone in this building is lying, Mr. Kang. It's the house style." "Call me June." Not a request, a quiet order. "June." Saying it did something strange in my chest that I didn't have time to examine. He reached out and tilted my chin toward the firelight, studying my face like he could read the truth off my skin if he looked hard enough. "Are you afraid of me, Zora?" "Should I be?" "Most people are." "I'm not most people." "No," he agreed quietly. "You're really not." He let go and walked to the window, back to me, silhouetted against the falling snow. "You'll stay here until I know exactly who you are. That's not negotiable. If you refuse to cooperate, my guards will make sure you stay anyway, just with a lot less comfort. I'd like clean clothes and a separate room. You'll have both." He opened a side door onto a room bigger than most apartments I'd lived in. "Anything you need, ask. Except your freedom." "Except that," I agreed, walking into what was clearly my very expensive cage. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Because you saved my life, and I don't believe in coincidences." He leaned against the doorframe, watching my face for anything I might give away. "Nobody kisses a stranger to stop him from drinking poison unless they have very specific reasons for wanting him alive. Maybe I'm just a good person. Good people don't last long in my world, Zora, especially not the ones who work catering for men like me." He wasn't wrong. He left, and I waited exactly 5 minutes before kicking off my heels and pressing my bare feet to the cold floor, staring out at Seoul glowing beneath the snow, trying to figure out exactly how badly I'd wrecked my own mission. That's when I saw it, tucked casually near the bookshelf, a pistol resting against the wall like it belonged there, not hidden, placed deliberately, like bait. I crossed the room, picked up the pistol, and started breaking it down without thinking, hands moving on pure muscle memory built from years of training. Slide, spring, barrel. I didn't hear the door open behind me. Do event coordinators usually know how to field strip a handgun? I froze, the pieces laid out in front of me with obvious damning precision. There was no explaining this one away. "You left it there, on purpose," I said, turning to find June leaning in the doorway, watching me with an expression that mixed satisfaction and something dangerously close to admiration. "I did. I wanted to see what you'd do." He crossed the room slowly, picked up one of the disassembled pieces, turned it over in his hand, and looked back at me. Now I know for certain you're not an innocent little event planner, which makes you far more interesting than I expected. My pulse was racing, and it wasn't fear. It was the specific thrill of knowing I'd just crossed a line I couldn't uncross. "Who are you, really?" he asked, brushing his knuckles along my jaw. "Someone who just saved your life." "I know that already. I want to know who you work for." I could lie. I should lie. Instead, looking into his dark, unreadable eyes, feeling the heat of him too close, I asked, "If I tell you, will you kill me?" He smiled, the first real one I'd seen, dangerous and far too attractive for how much trouble it promised. "No, I'll keep you closer. Dangerous women are the only ones worth keeping." Morning arrived with snow still falling and June knocking on my door at 7 sharp, like sleep deprivation was part of the interrogation strategy. I hadn't slept much, not because the bed wasn't obscenely comfortable, but because my brain had spent the night cataloging exactly how thoroughly I'd blown my cover. "Breakfast," he announced, not an invitation, a summons. The table held more food than two people could reasonably eat. He was already seated, scrolling through something on his phone, wearing a black button-down with the sleeves shoved to his elbows, looking casually dangerous in a way that should have been illegal before 8 in the morning. "Zora Bunkole," he said, testing my name the way he had the night before. "Event coordinator, 3 years. Worked in 5 different cities in the last 2 years. Spotless references." "You looked into my background?" "I looked into your entire life." He set the phone down and leaned forward. "Want to know what I found? That you're either exceptional at your job or you're lying about all of it. My money's on lying. Betting is a dangerous habit." "I like danger," he smiled, slow and sharp. "So does someone who dodges around a shattered wine glass, disarms a loaded pistol under a minute, and stumbles on flat marble in 4-inch heels, but not on hardwood." He poured 2 glasses of wine, even though it was barely past sunrise. "Wine loosens tongues." "I'll pass." "Don't trust me? Would you trust you?" He laughed, a real low laugh that transformed his whole face for a couple of seconds. "No, never." I asked him quietly why he talked to me like an equal when I was technically his prisoner. "Because you are my equal," he said, all trace of humor gone. "Not in power, not in resources, but in everything that actually matters. You think fast, you fight better than half my men, and you saved my life when letting me die would have been the smarter move." I stood, purposely a little too fast, and accidentally sent my wine glass flying directly onto his shirt. Dark red bloomed across white cotton. "Oh my God," I said, hand over my mouth, playing horrified. "I'm so sorry, I'm so clumsy." He looked down at the ruined shirt, then at me, clearly deciding between laughing and throwing me out a window. He unbuttoned it right there without an ounce of shame, revealing a torso marked with old scars that told stories I wasn't going to ask about yet. "You did that on purpose," he said. I tripped. "Like you trip every time a conversation gets somewhere you don't want it to go?" The penthouse door swung open without warning, and one of the guards stormed in, the same one who'd been suspicious of me since the party. He froze at the sight of June shirtless and me standing too close. "Did I interrupt something?" he asked, voice thick with suspicion. "Wine accident," June said. The guard rounded on me. "Who are you really?" "A very polite event planner," I said, and immediately regretted the sarcasm. He grabbed my arm and shoved me against the wall, pinning my wrist above my head, blocking any exit. I used his own weight against him, twisted free, hooked his leg, and put him flat on his back with my knee against his chest and his wrist locked in a joint hold before he could blink. Total silence. He stared up at me in shock. June watched the whole thing without moving a muscle. "Let him go," June said calmly. I did. The guard got up, dignity in shreds, and left without another word after a look from June that could have melted steel. When we were alone again, June started laughing, loud and genuine. You just put my best guard on his back in under 3 seconds, and you're still trying to sell me on the clumsy act? He provoked me. I've provoked you plenty of times. Where's my takedown? The question landed heavier than it should have. You're different, I said before I could stop myself. Different how? He stepped closer. You're an idiot. I caught myself before I finished that sentence. You're what, Zora? Say it. Dangerous, I admitted. And you like danger. Not a question. He touched my face again, gentler this time, thumb brushing my jaw. You're lying about who you are, he murmured. But you're not lying about this, about whatever's happening between us. No, I agreed, because denying it would have been useless. I'm not. The next 3 days were slow, deliberate torture, and June knew exactly what he was doing. He found excuses to sit beside me instead of across from me, to brush my fingers when handing me coffee, to invade whatever small space I tried to carve out for myself. Every touch was calculated. Every calculation worked. Running away again, he murmured near my ear one morning when I tried to put distance between us. Protecting myself, I corrected, turning to face him, which was a mistake because now we were breathing the same air. From me, from myself. I met his advisor around then, a composed, graying man named Director Han, who'd served the Kong family for over a decade and whose smile never once reached his eyes. He shook my hand a beat too firmly, studying me like a threat he hadn't classified yet, and every instinct I had told me not to trust him, even though I couldn't say exactly why. Soo-yoon found us in June's study not long after and let her fury loose the second the door shut behind her. So it's true, you're keeping the woman who ruined our engagement as a pet? Zora is my guest, June said, voice dangerously even. A guest, Soo-yoon laughed. Is that what we're calling prisoners now? I should have stayed quiet. I didn't. If I ruined your engagement, maybe it's because you were too busy trying to poison him to notice marriages work better when both people are alive. The silence that followed could have cracked stone. Soo-yoon lunged at me, and June pulled me behind him in one sharp, instinctive move. You don't touch her, he said. She just accused me of attempted murder. Did you do it or didn't you? June asked, ice in his voice. Soo-yoon's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I don't know what you're talking about. Liar, I said behind June. I watched you switch the glasses. She looked at me with pure venom and something else underneath it, something closer to desperation. She laughed without another word, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. You really don't know how to stay quiet, do you? June asked, somewhere between irritated and impressed. She basically called you an idiot. I felt obligated to defend your honor. My honor, he said dryly. Zora, I run one of the most feared organizations in this city. Honor rarely enters into it. 4 days later, he showed up at my door in a dark suit and an expression that put me instantly on alert. Wear something you can move in, he said. You're coming with me. Where? Business. And before you argue, you're not staying here unsupervised, because I don't trust you not to run, and because there are people in this compound who'd love to use you as leverage if I'm not around. I dressed in dark, practical clothes, and when I stepped out, his eyes moved over me with an approval that warmed my skin more than it should have. 3 identical black SUVs waited in the garage, engines running, guards stationed like sentries. We pulled out in convoy formation, Seoul sliding by gray and white through the windows. Where exactly are we headed? I asked. Warehouse district. Territory negotiation with a smaller crew trying to expand. He glanced at me, something flickering behind his eyes. Dangerous, I know, but I've got you to save me if it goes wrong, don't I? The convoy turned onto a narrow side street lined with shuttered buildings, and the silence outside went from quiet to wrong in an instant. June, I started, and the explosion cut me off. The lead car went up in a fireball, metal raining across the street. Our driver slammed the brakes, but the rear car exploded a second later, boxing us in completely. Ambush, someone shouted from the front seat, already armed.
June shoved me down, covering me with his body as bullets started hammering the reinforced glass, cracks spidering across it with every hit. "How many?" he shouted. "At least 10 elevated positions," came the reply. This was planned. Of course it was planned. Someone had known our route, our timing, our protocols. Internal betrayal settled cold in my stomach. "We need to get out," I said. "We're sitting targets in here." June looked at me with something between shock and respect. "You know how to fight?" "Better than you'd guess." He pulled a second pistol from an ankle holster and pressed it in my hand. "Don't disappoint me." The weight of it in my palm felt like coming home after weeks of pretending otherwise. We got out together on a 3 count, and I dropped behind the car, assessing shooter positions with the trained eye I'd spent years building. 3 left, 2 right, several more on the street. I fired, neutralized, not killed, wherever I could manage it. When 2 attackers closed in on June, I crossed the distance in seconds, took one down with the butt of my gun, disarmed the second, and threw him hard enough into the car that he didn't get back up. Then, silence. The remaining shooters had scattered. June stared at me like he was seeing me clearly for the first time. "Who the hell are you?" "Later," I said. "We need to move before they come back with backup." That's when a figure staggered out from between the buildings, Soo-yoon, bleeding, dress torn, hands raised. "Don't shoot," she called. "I didn't know it would be like this." June walked towards her, gun still drawn, face unreadable. "You were here." "They forced me," she sobbed. "Director Han said it was just to scare you, to show you needed me. He didn't say it would be this." The confession landed like a bomb. 10 years of loyalty, and Director Han had orchestrated the poisoning attempt, the ambush, and who knew what else. "Where is he?" demanded. "I don't know. He left me here." June raised the gun to her head, fingers steady on the trigger, and I moved without thinking, my hand over his, lowering it. "Don't." She was used. Han is the real problem. He looked at me, some internal war playing out behind his eyes, and finally lowered the weapon. "Take her back. Full lockdown." When we were alone in the wreckage, he turned the gun towards me instead, calm and lethal. "Now we are going to talk about who you really are." There was no more room to lie. "You're right. I was placed here, before the engagement dinner, sent to watch you, report on your operations." Pain crossed his face like a physical blow. "By who?" I told him the truth, that my father ran one of the most powerful crime families on the East Coast, that I'd been sent as an operative, that I was Elijah Benkoli's daughter. The silence that followed was suffocating. "You deceived me from the beginning," he said. "Yes, the kiss saving your life, that part was real. Everything after that was real too. How can I believe anything you say?" "You can't, but I'll tell you anyway. I switched sides the second that glass rising to your mouth. Everything changed in that moment. You were trained for this, born for it. I was, and I can choose to leave it. No one chooses to leave this life, Zora. You know that better than anyone."
He was right, and we both knew it had changed everything between us, permanently. But standing in the smoking wreckage, watching his face, I didn't see hatred. I saw pain, raw and unguarded, and that broke something in me completely. The drive back was silent. June didn't speak, just stared out the window, while I sat as far from him as the seat allowed, the weight of everything pressing down on both of us. When we reached the compound, he walked straight to the penthouse without a word, and I followed because I had nowhere else to go and everything left to explain. He poured a drink the second the door shut, drained it in one motion, and threw the glass against the wall. It shattered into 1,000 pieces across the floor. 3 months, he said, back still to me. You pretended to be someone else for 3 months. Yes. You reported everything, every meeting, every weakness. At first, I admitted, chest tightening. I stopped. When? When I realized I was falling for you. The words came out with no protection left around them. He froze, then took 2 steps back like the sentence had physically hit him. Don't say that, not after everything you did. It's true. I was sent to spy. That part is true. But when I saw that glass, I didn't think about the mission. I thought about you. Only you. You betrayed me, he said, voice breaking on the word. I kissed you to save your life, I said, stepping closer, and I saved you again today. Do you think I'd have done that if none of it mattered? He studied me, hands trembling slightly against the table behind him. How can I trust you? I can't, I said, honestly. But I can prove it. Han is planning something bigger. He manipulated Su-yoon, set the ambush. I can help you find him. I have contacts, resources, knowledge you don't have. Your family, he said bitterly. The same family that probably wants me dead as much as Han does. Not necessarily. Alliances shift. Enemies become allies when the interest is mutual. He shook his head, breathing uneven. If I trust you and you betray me again, I won't get a second chance to regret it. I know, and I'm asking anyway. I reached out and pressed my palm to his chest, felt his heart pounding beneath it. I accept that risk. He caught my hand and held it there instead of pushing it away, some battle still raging behind his eyes. You're going to be my ruin, he whispered. Or my salvation, I answered. He pulled me close, forehead against mine. I don't want to forgive you. I want to hate you for lying to me. Then hate me, I whispered back. Just don't send me away. We stayed like that a long moment, and when he finally kissed me, it wasn't strategy or survival. It was a choice. When we broke apart, he murmured something low in Korean that sounded like both a promise and a warning. What does that mean? I asked. That I'm officially the biggest fool in Seoul because I'm choosing to trust the daughter of a rival family who spent 3 months lying to my face. Or the bravest, I offered. There's not much difference between brave and suicidal. He brushed hair from my face. But I don't regret it. Not yet. The next morning, he woke me early, already dressed, expression grim. Get ready. We're interrogating Su-yoon. Together. It felt like a test, and I understood why. He wanted proof, not just words. She was being held in a small room with a bed, a chair, and a barred window, still in the torn clothes from the ambush. When she saw us, the hatred in her eyes hit like a physical wall. Why is she here? She demanded. Because I want her here, June said. You're going to answer questions. Both of you are staying until we get to the truth. Answer to the man who nearly let me die yesterday? To the man who chose her over me? Careful, June said quietly, and there was a warning buried in it. Or what? Su-yoon stepped toward me, chin lifted. You'll let your little pet handle it for you? Something in me snapped. 3 months of playing helpless, days of being tested and provoked, and now this? I crossed the room and hit her, a real hit, full weight behind it, everything I'd learned in years of training. She staggered but didn't fall, blood at her lip, fury replacing shock in her eyes. Little pet, she spat and lunged. We went down together, tangled, trading blows, all of her rage against my training. She fought like someone raised in violence, wild and relentless despite lacking technique. I pinned her arms and she twisted free, flipping our positions, hands closing around my throat. You think you're different? She hissed. Han said June would discard me after the wedding, that women never get real power here. You think he'll treat you any differently? Her words caught me off guard just long enough for her to shove free. June pulled us apart, hauling her back by the shoulders, while I got up, wiping blood I couldn't tell was mine or hers. Han manipulated you from the start, I shouted. Don't you see that? I see plenty, she said, going still. I see that men like Han and June use women as pieces on a board. It's always been that way. Not always, June said. She laughed, bitter. You're going to pretend you're different now? That this marriage was ever about anything but territory? I never claimed it was about love, but I never planned to discard you either. You'd have had a real seat at the table.
Lies. Han showed me the paperwork. I'd have had nothing. Something cold crossed June's face. What paperwork? It came out slowly. Han had shown her falsified terms, convinced her she'd be discarded, planted the idea that killing June and marrying into widowhood, guided by Han himself, was her only real path to power. He lied, Su-yoon whispered, horror replacing fury. From the beginning, I agreed, because men like him win when women like us are too busy fighting each other to notice who the actual enemy is.
Something shifted in her expression when she looked at me. Not warmth, but reluctant recognition. "You fight well," she admitted, for an event planner. "You too, for a decorative bride." Almost a smile touched her split lip. "I hate you." Feelings mutual, but I hate Han more. Much more, she agreed. June watched the exchange with something between surprise and pride. He pulled out a folder, the real marriage terms, negotiated in good faith, granting Su-yoon genuine authority over 2 divisions of the organization. She read it with shaking hands, eyes widening. "This is real power." "That was always the deal," June confirmed. "Han altered it and showed you a lie." "He used me," she said, venom returning, but aimed differently now. "Exactly the way he claimed you would." "Where is he now?" I asked. "Gone since the ambush," June said, jaw tight. "He knows every safe house, every route. He's been building this for a long time." "Then we need to turn his own strategy against him," I said. "Use his blind spots." Su-yoon stood, wiping blood from her chin with new focus. "Agreed, but how?" "I think Han underestimates women," I said, slowly, pieces clicking together. "That's his fatal flaw. He'll never expect us to work together. Much less plan to take him down," Su-yoon added. I looked between them. "I have the start of a plan, but it requires both of you trusting me completely." "I trust you," June said, instantly, and the warmth that brought was dangerous. Su-yoon studied me a long moment before extending her hand. "I hate to admit this, but you fought beside him during the ambush. You could have run. You didn't. And you could have let Han have me killed. You told the truth instead. So we're doing this? 2 women who despise each other working together?" "3 people Han underestimated," I corrected, glancing at June. "That's what's going to end him." June smiled, dark and satisfied. "I like how you think." "Same," Su-yoon admitted, reluctant. "I still hate you." "The feeling's mutual," I assured her. "We can go back to hating each other after we take Han apart." Neither of us knew yet how much Han underestimated us, and neither did he. June found out about the plans Su-yoon and I were building completely by accident. We hadn't been hiding it exactly, just hadn't rushed to share it before it was ready. Unfortunately, he walked into the room we'd claimed and found us bent over a map of the city, marking every location Han might be hiding in. The silence when he stopped in the doorway could have frozen the room solid. "What is happening here?" Su-yoon straightened, unbothered. "We're finding Han." "I was going to tell you," I started, but he cut me off with a sharp motion. "After you'd already decided everything, behind my back." "It's not behind your back," I said, keeping my voice level despite the anger radiating off him. "It's to help you." "I don't need help, especially not from you 2 pretending to understand how to handle Han." "Pretending?" Su-yoon stepped forward. "I lived with that man's manipulation for years. I know exactly how he thinks. Do you?" "And you," June turned on me, "think you understand him better than I do after being in this compound for less than a month?" 3 months, I corrected. "I was embedded for 3 months, remember? I studied you too." Wrong thing to say. His expression closed completely, and he stepped back like the words had physically struck him. "Right, the spy. How could I forget?" "June," I reached for him. "No." His voice went cold, controlled. "You 2 want to play strategists? Fine, but not with my resources and not behind my back." "We're not hiding anything," Su-yoon snapped. "Do you honestly think we're incapable of contributing something useful?" "I think,
and the words landed like sexist brutality neither of us expected. You're two women trying to prove a point in a world that doesn't have patience for it. The silence that followed was ice. I watched regret flash across his face the instant the words left his mouth, but pride kept him from taking them back. You did not just say that, I said quietly. I did, he said, holding his ground, and I'll say it again. I don't need help. Han is my problem. Your way? Soo-yoon laughed bitterly. The way that let your 10-year advisor betray you without you noticing a thing? It was a low blow, and we all knew it. June went pale with anger, fists clenched, and for a second I thought he might actually explode. Instead, he turned and headed for the door. This meeting's over. Soo-yoon, back to your room. Zora, you're coming with me. No, I said, staying exactly where I was. He stopped, hand on the doorknob, and turned his head slowly. What did you say? No, I repeated. I'm not leaving until you actually listen to us. Zora, a clear warning. You need help, and you need to hear it. Be careful what you say next, or what, you'll lock me up again? I stepped toward him. Han is out there right now, turning your own men against you, and you're standing here having a meltdown because two women dared to plan something without asking your permission first. This is not about being women, he started, and Soo-yoon cut in sharply. It's exactly about that. She walked over to stand beside me, a united front. You can pretend otherwise, but Han convinced me you'd discard me because women don't hold real value in this organization, and right now, you're proving him right. June dragged his hair through his hair, frustration cracking through the anger, and walked to the window staring out at the city with his jaw set tight. That's not what this is, he said, finally, quieter. Then what is it? I asked, approaching carefully.
Control, he admitted, still not facing me. Watching you two plan without me, it feels like I'm losing my grip on everything, and I've already lost enough this week. The vulnerability caught me off guard. Soo-yoon quietly excused herself, leaving us alone. June, I touched his arm. Nobody's taking your control away. We're trying to help you get it back. I know. He finally turned, exhaustion clear in his eyes. Seeing you and Soo-yoon barking together like old allies reminded me that you both understand this world in ways I never had to learn, and I'm just the fool who trusted the wrong man for 10 years. You're not a fool. I held his face in both hands. Han was an expert manipulator. He fooled everyone. He didn't fool you completely. You suspected something was wrong. He caught my wrists gently, keeping my hands where they were. You noticed before I did. Because I had an outsider's view, it doesn't make you weak, it makes him dangerous. He kissed my knuckles, tenderness colliding with the anger still simmering underneath. I hate needing help. Lucky for you, you have a weakness for stubborn women who help anyway. I smiled despite everything. He almost smiled back. Do you and Soo-yoon actually hate each other? Completely, I confirmed. She's arrogant, still clearly has feelings for you, but I admitted reluctantly, she thinks fast and knows things about Han that we need. I can hate someone and still respect their strategic value. Pragmatic. Learned from the best. The door burst open before I could say more, and one of the guards rushed in, panic written across a face that was usually unreadable. Boss, Soo-yoon's gone. What do you mean gone? June was already moving. She left her room 10 minutes ago. Cameras caught her heading toward the garage. He held out a tablet, then handed over an envelope that had been left at the gate. Inside was a single line, handwritten, "Trade her for your surrender. Han." My blood ran cold. Han had somehow gotten into the compound and taken Soo-yoon. When? June demanded. 5 minutes ago? Maybe less? June was already pulling his weapon, barking orders, but I grabbed his arm before he could move. Wait, this is an obvious trap. He wants you running after him, wants you exposed. And you want me to let her die? I'm saying do it smart. Let me go. What? No. Instant, furious. He doesn't see me as a threat, I said quickly. He thinks I'm just your distraction. He won't expect me to walk in to negotiate. That's exactly why it won't work.
He gripped my shoulders. He'll figure it out and kill you the second he does. Not if I'm prepared. I turned to the guard. Can you track me? Something Han won't find? He hesitated, glancing between us before nodding. I can. Then do it, I ordered, surprising even myself with the authority in my voice. June, you coordinate backup. When I confirm the location, you move in. Absolutely not. He pulled me close, forehead against mine. I'm not using you as bait. It's not bait. It's trust. Trust me. I watched the war behind his eyes. Fear, fury, desperation, tangled with something deeper that made my chest ache. If something happens to you, he didn't finish. Nothing will happen, I promised, meaning it more than I probably should have, because I'll have you as backup and you never miss. He kissed me, hard, fast, loaded with fear and need. When we separated, he pressed his forehead to mine one more time. Come back to me, he said, or I'll burn this entire city looking for you. I'll come back, I said, with Soo-yoon and Han's head, metaphorically. They rigged a tracking device into an earring while I checked the pistol tucked at the small of my back. This time I didn't argue about going armed. The drive to the meeting point was quiet, the driver dropping me 2 blocks out at my request. I needed to walk in alone, needed to look desperate and unarmed. Snow was falling hard when I stepped out, the industrial district empty and gray, warehouses rising like rusted skeletons against the sky. I found the right building easily, door cracked open like an invocation that was obviously a trap. Inside, the space was vast and cold, except for a weak light near the back. I followed it and found exactly what I expected. Soo-yoon tied to a chair, Han beside her, a gun pressed to her head. Zora Bankola, Han said, smiling like a man who'd already won. I expected Kong Jun to come himself. He wanted to, I said, stopping a safe distance away. I convinced him I'd be more useful. More useful? How? A prisoner with no real leverage, a spy who's already blown her cover, someone who can actually negotiate calmly, unlike a man who'd probably arrive shooting. He laughed. True, he was always too emotional to lead properly. Soo-yoon's eyes cut to mine, trying to communicate something silently, dried blood at her mouth, fury simmering behind the fear. What do you actually want? I asked. What I've always wanted, Han said, circling her slowly. Control of the organization, the respect I earned after a decade of being treated as a subordinate. Then why the elaborate plan instead of just killing him? Because killing isn't enough, Han snapped, mask slipping. I want him to watch everything he built collapse. I want him to know it was me, the man he never once considered a real threat. There it was, wounded pride dressed up as ambition. Han didn't just want power, he wanted June to suffer for underestimating him. You underestimated all of us, I said, stepping closer. Soo-yoon, me, every piece you thought you could move without resistance. Pieces, Han sneered. Women are always the easiest pieces to move, predictable, easily manipulated by promises of power or fear of being discarded. Really? Soo-yoon spoke for the first time, hoarse but furious. You didn't predict I'd tell them everything. Han's expression darkened. You were supposed to be dead by now.
But I'm not, I said, closing the distance slowly, because he's not the monster you painted him as, and we're not the fools you assumed. That's when I caught it. Soo-yoon's hands shifting behind the chair, working the ropes loose, waiting for her moment. Han caught my distraction and swung the gun toward me. Enough. Call June. Tell him to come alone, unarmed. Or what? You kill me? I thought I was valuable. You're expendable, he said coldly, and fired. I threw myself sideways as the shot cracked past, close enough to scorch through my coat, and rolled behind a stack of crates, pistol drawn. Before I could line up a shot, more chaos erupted. Soo-yoon had freed herself and lunged at Han barehanded, fighting to redirect the barrel. I came out of cover and fired, catching Han in the shoulder. He screamed, dropped the gun, and Soo-yoon snatched it up, hands shaking but steady enough to keep it aimed at Han. It's over, she said, venom and satisfaction in equal measure. That's when I heard footsteps thundering from outside, voices shouting orders. June had arrived, ignoring every agreement about waiting for a signal. He burst through the door with a wave of backup, scanned the room, me, Soo-yun, Han bleeding on the floor, and the relief on his face nearly broke me. He crossed the space in seconds and pulled me close, checking me over frantically. "You promised to wait for my signal." "We both lied," I said, pressing my forehead to his for one steadying second. Soo-yun still had the gun trained on Han, hand trembling. "He deserves to die." "He does," June agreed evenly. "Not by your hand. That would destroy you, and you're better than that." I watched the fight play out on her face, grief and fury against reason, before she finally lowered the weapon. Backup dragged Han away, bleeding, still hurling hatred at all three of us with what strength he had left. Sirens rose somewhere in the distance. In the middle of the wreckage, 3 people Han had badly underestimated were still standing. 3 days after the warehouse, June called a full assembly of the organization. Not a routine meeting, but a formal gathering of every division head, every ally with real standing in the city's underworld. I was nervous in a way I hadn't let myself feel in weeks. He'd asked me to attend without telling me exactly why, only to dress like it mattered and trust him. The main hall was packed by the time I arrived, familiar faces from the engagement dinner mixed with new ones, all watching me with curiosity they weren't bothering to hide. Soo-yun was already seated near the front, in a sharply tailored suit, poised and unreadable. When our eyes met, she gave a small nod. Not friendship, probably never that, but something like mutual respect. June entered last, and the whole room shifted its attention to him instantly, the way it always did. "Thank you for coming," he began, voice carrying easily through the hall. "The last few days have tested this organization. Betrayal from within, a direct attack. Real change is coming." Murmurs moved through the crowd. Everyone already knew about Han, about the failed coup. "Director Han is being dealt with according to our laws. Betrayal has no forgiveness here. He will answer for everything." Nobody disagreed. "I want to talk about something else," June continued, eyes finding mine through the crowd. "About the person who saved my life. Not once, several times." My stomach dropped. He wasn't seriously about to do this in front of everyone. "Zora Bankole, come here." I had no choice but to walk through the parted crowd, heavy stares following every step, until I reached his side. He took my hand, laced our fingers together in full view of the room. "Many of you know Zora as the coordinator who was present at my engagement dinner. Some of you know she saved me from poisoning that night. Fewer of you know the full truth." My pulse spiked. Was he really about to expose everything? "Zora is not a prisoner," he said, firm and unmistakable. "She is a partner. She fought beside me, risked her life for people who had no reason to trust her, and proved her loyalty when walking away would have been easier. Starting today, she has a permanent seat in every decision on security and strategy." Shock rippled through the hall. Men who'd spent decades climbing this organization, staring at a woman who'd shown up out of nowhere, now being handed real power. "For anyone who takes issue with that," June added, voice carrying the weight of a warning, "remember it was Zora who identified the betrayal none of us caught. Zora who rescued Soo-yun when Han took her. Zora who stood beside me when running would have been the safer choice." He turned slightly towards Soo-yun, who rose and crossed to stand on his other side. The 3 of us presented together, sending a message nobody in that room could misread. "Soo-yun Bae will take over as head of intelligence and strategic analysis," June announced. "She has skills this organization needs. I expect full cooperation." Soo-yun's smile was sharp, satisfied, the smile of a woman who'd finally gotten exactly what she was owed. "It'll be a pleasure working with all of you," she said, in a tone that made it clear disrespect wouldn't be tolerated. The meeting continued with logistics, restructuring, new protocols after Han's betrayal, but the real message had already landed.
Two women this organization had underestimated now held real, permanent power. When the hall finally emptied, it was just the three of us. "I'm never going to like you," Soo-yoon said, looking at me. "Feelings mutual," I said honestly, "but I respect you." She extended her hand. "Partners?" I shook it. "Partners who hate each other. The best kind." She smiled faintly, then turned to June. "Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for no longer trying to poison me," he said dryly, and she laughed on her way out, leaving the two of us finally alone. June pulled me close, hands settling at my waist with an ease that already felt familiar. "You just outed me publicly." "I claimed you publicly. Important distinction. You didn't ask my opinion first." "I knew you'd argue," he smiled. "I wasn't in the mood to negotiate." "You're impossible," I said, unable to hide my own smile. "And absurdly mine." He tilted my chin up. "Officially now." He kissed me slowly, without an audience, without hidden poison or buried agendas, just the two of us, finally honest. When we broke apart, I kept my eyes closed a second longer, savoring it. "Next time I kiss you in public, it'll be because I ordered you to." "I don't obey orders," I reminded him, raising an eyebrow. "You can keep telling yourself that," he said, grinning. "It makes everything more interesting." He looked younger in that moment, free of the constant weight he usually carried. But standing there wrapped up in him, some part of me already understood this wasn't really the ending. It was only the beginning of alliances that would be tested, power that would need defending, and a war I'd have to survive as the queen at his side or the next name on somebody's list. If you want to know what happens next, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because this story is far from over.